how many of you know, like I know, that the least common thing these days is common sense? So cover your mouth when you cough or sneeze. Also, stay at home when you are sick. Stay at home when you are sick. Stay at home when you are sick. And in case you didn't hear me the first two times, stay at home when you are sick. That event, that service, that game, that movie, whatever it is that you feel like you just have to be at, guess what's going to happen, ladies and gentlemen? It's going to go on without you. So please stay at home when you are sick and stay away from people who are sick as well. Also, also, cover, wipe down frequently touched objects and items with some type of disinfectant. Wipe them down with some type of disinfectant. Uh, and you also may want to mix in some hand sanitizer or something in your vehicle so that when you are driving and you have to go to the gas station, when you pump the gas, then you will be able to sanitize your hands as if you don't know who touched that pump prior to you touching it. And this was brought to you by the the National Association of Broadcasters, and this station, No Static Radio, where we don't bring the static, but we sure enough bring the noise, powered by Google and sponsored by Lamont Avenue Wines. If you are in the Cleveland area on the first or third Saturday of each month, I've got some great news for you. On the first or third Saturday of each month at 6812 Woodland Avenue in Cleveland, Ohio, they are giving away a free bag of groceries. Now listen, you do not have to show proof of residence. You do not have to show identification. You do not have to show anything. You just show up and you get a free bag of groceries, no questions asked. But not only that, not only do you get the free bag of groceries, but you also get free clothing for yourself, that's an adult, and children. But there's more. In addition to the free bag of groceries, and in addition to the free clothing for both yourself and children, if you are there between the hours of 11:30 a.m. and 1:30 p.m., you get a free hot lunch, a home cooked meal, free hot lunch. So yummy for you, yummy to your tummy. And when is this, you ask? This is the first and third Saturday of each month. Where? 6812 Woodland Avenue, Cleveland, Ohio. What time? 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. every first and third Saturday of the month. And we want to shout out the Greater Cleveland Food Bank, We Care Ministries, and also Williams Temple Church of God in Christ, who hosts this event each and every month. Now, those of you that are new to this program, this is what we do. We talk politics, we talk sports, we talk the issues of the day. I throw out some topics on the table, and I give my take on said topics, and then we invite you to call in with your take on those topics at 216-939-5087, 216-939-5087. Now, here are the ground rules for the show. You are allowed one call per show, and you have a 10-minute minimum on your call. Now, there is not a talk show around that will allow you to talk for 10 minutes on it. So you're catching a break there. And, you know, if you can't get everything in 10 minutes and in one call, then there's too much you're trying to get in. So those are the only ground rules we have. Again, there's one call per show, and you have a 10-minute window to get your take in. This week, in our first hour, coming up very shortly, we're going to have via phone interview Garrett Bush, aka G. Bush, host of the Barbershop on 92.3 The Fan here in Cleveland, Ohio. He's going to be on. We're going to be talking sports and politics with Garrett Bush during this time period. In our second hour, we are going to look at the tragic results of the Stand Your Ground law in Florida. There was a tragic incident, I'm sure you've heard about it, happened just a week ago yesterday. We're going to look at that in our second hour. We're also going to give our take on the indictments that were handed down by Special Prosecutor Jack Smith on Thursday on Wednesday, to Donald Trump, former President Donald Trump. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to give our hero and our zero of the week, and so the talk about the stand your ground law in Florida and actually in other states across the country as well, and also our thoughts on the indictments handed down by the Department of Justice, these historic indictments handed down by the Department of Justice on Thursday to former President Donald Trump. That will be what we're talking about in our second hour. But in our first hour, as I said, we are going to shortly have via telephone Garrett Bush, who is the host of the Barbershop, which is a local sports talk show here in Cleveland, Ohio, but he also has a podcast as well. And so we're going to give him an opportunity to talk about that when he comes on also. So that's what we have, and you can have at it. Again, our call-in number is 216-939-5087, 216-939-5087. Now, when Garrett Bush is on, we won't be able to take any calls at that time. If you have any questions for him, you can text those questions to area code 216-306-8504. G. Bush, welcome to the right side and welcome to No Static Radio. We're so glad to have you again. Well, we're always glad to have you. We're always consider it a privilege and an honor when you come on, because you know you are one of the people that inspire me. You're one of my role models. So it's like student teacher here. I'm the student. You're the teacher, and so it's always an honor to have you on. Tell our audience. I told them about your weekly radio show on Saturdays on local radio station, the Barbershop, from 8 a.m. to 12 noon on Saturdays. But you also host a podcast. What is the podcast that you host, and how can people pick that up?
So I'm going to be, I have a podcast called BARBERSHOPs Garrett Bush. It's also a YouTube channel. So I'm going to be doing some stuff on there. I got a couple of really good counseling. I was approached by a couple of sponsors to kind of do, podcast, kind of a podcast version of what I do on the radio. So we're going to be doing that in the barbershop. You check that out. It will also be on Spotify and Apple television platforms. So you'll be able to check that out. And I'm trying to figure out how many times that we can do it. I think I'm going to start off with maybe once or twice and do that. So you'll be able to check that out. This is Garrett Bush. On YouTube, it'll pop up, and it'll be on every single platform you can think of as far as podcasting as well. I'm also do the 11 on the Upper Sports Show. I'm on there every single day. So we have Alex Lewis, Dick Crawford, Samara, according to the high school grad of 7. On there as well.
And Ohio State Buckeye.
And Ohio State Buckeye.
Thank you for that. Yes, sir.
The great thing about that show is we have one of the great interviews. Like we've interviewed some of the best. We've interviewed Ray Pruitt. We've had Archie Griffin on there. We've had Brian Day to Mike Dawson in the studio. We have a bunch of people that ran on the other day. Lego. So it's a really good show. It's all about sleep. It's all about stuff. It's all about a lot of issues. We had fun on that show. Both the format, you guys can check that out. You can check all the shows, all the episodes over here on YouTube. So you can check that out on the WKYC now.
Okay, that's great. Now, do you have a launch date soon for your Barbershop podcast? Have you set a launch date?
Yeah. I'm gonna have that up by the end of June. Probably
Hey, privilege. Breaking it on here, breaking it on the right side.
So I said, look, I've done the Cleveland Browns pregame show tonight. You can say on Sunday from 9 a.m. to kickoff at 1 o'clock. I've done that show for 6 years as a feature with, I've done 6 years with them. And I was approached, got an opportunity. I said, listen, man, Aura,
Yes,
with this company is Miss Moses. Said,
yes.
listen, man, do you what if we reach out to you and say, hey, let's do a show? And I'm going to be doing a YouTube version of a pregame show every single game for 17 weeks. I'll start that in the preseason. Start the first preseason game, the Hall of Fame kickoff game. I'm going to be doing a pregame show. The show is going to be 2 hours before kickoff. So kickoff is at 1 o'clock. I'll be doing it, doing the pregame show until 12 o'clock, which is 11 to 12. If the kickoff is at nighttime, I'll be doing it I think the Hall of Fame game, the Hall of Fame game is going to be at 8 o'clock.
Mhm.
So I will be doing that from 6 o'clock to 7 o'clock. Give you a chance an hour if you need to commute somewhere, if you need to go watch the game with somebody, or you need to get some stuff, you'll get our whole hour. It's almost like church. You get about an hour before the ground is set there. So you go so long, so you'll be ready to go wherever you need to go. And so I will be doing that on my channel. That'll be a podcast as well as a YouTube thing. So you'll be able to get that on both things.
Okay, and you're listening to the right side on No Static Radio. We don't bring the static, we're trying to bring the noise. We have via phone interview Garrett Bush, the host of multi things. Night, Barbershop, 923 The Fan, Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show, podcast, soon to be launched, Barbershop podcast, and pregame, Brown, postgame. He's doing it all, y'all. So it's a privilege to have him on today. Garrett, before we get into the nuts and bolts of what we wanted to talk about today, just how did you get into this whole thing, into this whole broadcasting thing? Now, you played football at Canton, at the world-renowned Canton McKinley High School. And when you were playing football for them, and I believe you went from there on to Ohio University, did you ever think that you would be doing something like what you're doing right now?
No, I knew I always loved sports. That's why I was like talking to people. But I felt like I was in both positions when I was, I graduated with a marketing communications degree. Graduated from college with first fellowship with Charlotte, North Carolina, because that's what helped me come place in the country. I have family members that worked executives for a long time. One had worked at Blackstone, one worked at Bank of America. I actually, they asked me some local around. I went down there and I flew to Charlotte after high school, leading after college. I moved down there in about 2007, 2008. So I go down there and I start working as basically through customer financial planning. And I did that for about 2 years. But if you know anything about that time, it was the Great Recession.
Right,
And
right.
basically, I was down there working with pretty much anything that you mentioned. Stock market crashed. It was tough. It was like there was a lot of people lost their jobs. A lot of people were struggling. So I took the money that I, the little money that I did make. I'm glad I was able to save up, and I went back to Canton, Ohio. My mother from Canton, Ohio, back in Kansas. I was thinking about figuring out what the next move was. And I was
Right.
And if you graduated from college, you are not eligible for financial aid. It's an age, so it's cool. So I'm like, oh, this but I took the last little bit of money that I had, didn't even cover the entire year of the program. It covered like probably 4 months. So I went, popped up, gave all the money I had, and I enrolled in Ohio State. And I didn't know how I was gonna take the test. But God blessed me, and I was just double in the hallway. You ain't gonna catch me. Like this financial aid people kept bringing me down. I didn't have it. I was can't school. And how niggas school was around the time was attending. So I'm driving 3 times a day. I got an internship at USC in Cleveland. So I'm driving there 3, 4 times a day. I was back and forth to Cleveland so much that there was times I just look back at it and say, I don't even know how I have the financial wherewithal to even do it. But, pay for students, plus pay just to park in different places. And, I look back and I just think it's all a blessing because, how sometimes, they talk about it, sometimes in your life, it's the whole footprint thing where you don't think God is with you, but you look back, he's been carrying you
That's
the
when
whole
he was
time.
carrying you. Yeah, I'm listening to you saying what you're saying. It makes me think of the gospel song that says, "I look back and wonder how I got over, but didn't know that all that time that God was carrying me." So you were quite familiar with I-77 then in those days.
Oh man, it was times where during that time period, like I was paying for food, I was putting gas in my car. During that time when especially, gas was $4, $2, $4. And I'm just driving back and forth every single day. And there was times where reasons why I sympathize, empathize with you. There were times where I couldn't even get the car insurance. Oh,
Mm.
driving on the highway. And I'm thinking, man, I'm going outside. What if I hit somebody? What if I die here in the vehicle? Like, I couldn't even pay for the insurance to stop. But all I kept telling me, like, all God just kept telling me, like, keep going, keep going. I just prayed, and it just worked. Like, that whole time, I never tipped nobody. I never, like, got my car. Like, this place, I would park my car and find little places so I didn't have to pay for parking. You know what I'm saying? Parking in Cleveland is expensive, so I was thinking people getting their cars towed and stuff, so I never got no tickets. Never got any of that, but I was praying every day, and I look back at it, I don't even know how I did it, like because I was simply doing all that ministry thing on the quick. It's too stressful, along with just the concept of not even knowing if the vehicle was gonna pay off. So
Well, you got one of those like we have in church all the time. One of those won't he do it? One of those won't he do it
yes,
testimonies.
it will.
All right, don't let me start preaching up on here now. So and but I'm glad you got that story out because that's a story that everybody needs to hear, but especially young people, a story of perseverance that through adversity comes testing, and through testing comes perseverance, and through perseverance comes hope, and through hope comes faith, and through faith comes success. So, you're a living testimony to that, and I'm glad that you got that story out there like you did. So, just as a FYI, even though I grew up, born and raised here in Cleveland, my family is from Steubenville, so I'm quite familiar with the old All American Conference with Kent McKinley, Warren Harding, Massillon. Sorry to say that word to a McKinley grad, and Steubenville. So there were a couple times that I came down to Fawcett Stadium to see Steubenville and Kent McKinley play. This was before you were playing, but to see those games, and those were that was high school football at its finest, and I'm sure you were glad to be able to participate in that.
Oh my goodness. You could give them their position in Steubenville is crazy. Like they was one of those towns where they talked about it like Friday night, Saturday night, they shut the whole town down.
Yep,
Everybody was in the game.
yep,
And just the fact that they would play, we played Steubenville
Yeah.
and all of those
Yeah.
by the all and they played so hard. Like they played the simple. Like you play a game and you do it the next day, you know you was playing. Like I told him in that side, we ended up tying seven. And a lot of people, like we got back to the home, and a lot of people was like, and we had our heads down to it, and these guys, man, we tied Louisville, and they was like, nah, bro, you don't understand. Louisville got a good tradition. Like y'all gonna be arguing. Drew New York won 6 championships that year, but Louisville was like Louisville. They wasn't playing, bro. They was we played against Louisville. It was bad.
I can only imagine. I can only imagine. You're listening to the right side on No Static Radio. We don't bring the static, but we sure not bring the noise. We have via phone interview Garrett Bush with us. Okay, G, on to the more mundane things of life, so to speak here. That's the local sports scene, and we want to talk about it on a national level as well. And if time allows, I've got a political question to ask you about too as well. But first topic I want to talk to you about is the Cleveland Browns and this upcoming season that's about to embark. They just finished mandatory mini camp, so they're off for the next 6 weeks or so. I know the coaching staff is holding their breath and crossing their fingers that they don't get a call in the middle of the night. And speak to that before we even get into what your outlook is as far as the season is concerned. Speak to that, especially given the events of the last week or so, where Greg Newsom and Perry Winfrey were held up at gunpoint in downtown Cleveland, and there was some question about why were they out at such hours of the night. What what should be, or should there be any concerns on the coaching staff about what's going to happen in these next 4 to 6 weeks prior to when training camp starts?
Yeah, in general, and I look at general in our community, when you talk about African American entertainment, whether you're actors, whether you're a singer, rapper, whether you athlete, whether you're an influencer, TV star, whatever the case may be, there's always that element of it. And I think sometimes growing up in this country, when you see where the climate of it is, there's a lot of young athletes that don't understand exactly where they are. And what I mean by that is, in our country, um, we, because of just how much money is generated, how we've seen gambling, we've seen, the TV routes, we've seen the ticket sales, the crowds, NFL players, all athletes have been placed in a pedestal society where it's enforced meal tickets. I'll give you an example. Um, you look at there are things that politicians can do that players cannot.
Right.
You know, there was we sat and talked about Robert Anderson taking money. And trust me, I'm not a money guy.
Me either.
I believe in the Second Amendment. I do believe in the Second Amendment, but as far as my personal standpoint is, my parents never allowed us to have water heaters because it's illegal. Now some people say that's just me, but I grew up in a house where we didn't, we weren't allowed water heaters. We didn't digest certain things. We weren't allowed to have food in front of us because of the way my parents was just, they didn't raise Christians when I was born, so 40 some years. So, when you look at it, you think about it. We ran television. We set the leaders month of our time frame. So, we literally had elected officials that helped create our laws, who helped dictate what freedoms we do have. And sometimes who had AR-15s on our uniform.
Exactly. It's ridiculous.
We have guys with AR-15s inside their offices coming in saying, I dare you to stop this. And this was after January 6th. This was after a lot of the police. So think about that.
And G, well, since you went there, I'm just curious your take on the whole John Moran situation. We talked about it here on the show uh, last week, and my thing is this: so what he did was not illegal. It was not illegal. It wasn't intelligent, but it was not illegal. And when I say it wasn't intelligent, based on what had happened with his previous incident, and then less than not a year later, but less than 2 months later, here you are on video again, waving a firearm. It just makes me wonder, you know, what kind of friends? Because his boy is the one who taped it. So okay, if you and I are boys, right? And I know that you got in trouble early in the year for what you did in the strip club in Denver, and you and I, we rolling. I'm not going to video you and put you on IG, put you on blast like that for the world to see if I'm truly your boy. So sometimes, you got to wonder, who these guys are rolling with, do they really have their best interests at heart? And it just really makes you wonder. And then when I look at John Morant, and not saying that you got to come from the hood, to be hard. I'm not saying that. But John Morant grew up in a two-parent household in a suburb. Why is he trying to be hard? Why is he trying to come off like this wannabe thug or what have you? We played a clip. It was kind of raw, but was a clip nonetheless from an actual Crip member in Memphis who basically said that John Morant doesn't want to be about that life, because if you want to be about that life, then come hang out with me, come roll with me for the summer. I'll show you what that life is all about. And I just don't get it. Why is it that not just him but others? Why is it that you're trying to be? You're the face of a franchise. You're one of the up and coming stars in the league. Can possibly be the face of the league one day. So why is it that you want to branch off into this and try to play this thug life?
Well, I agree with that myself. And this is where I come off at it. Like when you talk about what you thought I was doing, how would it bring put them out there? Like how would they do that? Well, today it's a different set of rules, right? So today everything is about politics, right? So what good is being John Morant's friend if you can't show that you got more strength? If you friend, if you can't capitalize on John Morant's strength, if you can't monetize John Morant's strength, if you don't get no notoriety, no love, no street cred from it, so the only way you can do that is do it by doing that. I think the coach on the internet has not only figured out what he's trying to do with college, but
Right.
Get beside yourself that when you do have success, look what I did. God didn't want me to do this. I had to grind. I had to do this. I had to do this to get where I'm going. And you become puffed up. You become spiritual. You get that ego gets involved. And so, a lot of times, God is working with you on it. He's always told you, look, never be beside yourself. Now,
Amen.
at the end of the day, I'm pleased with everything. So, and I'm gonna put you in, but yeah, I'm gonna put you in elements. You're gonna do shows. You're gonna do a lot of things. But at the end of the day, you here to do my business. So
Exactly.
I'm gonna keep it different. But you know why you make a mandate of what I gotta do. And because I talked to him about it because he said we can discuss this if you want. But I want to put you in elements to discuss with you about what I need to do in my business so that you can be clear and know that I still operate as everybody. So a lot of times, that growth, and sometimes God will have you take it away from you. How many times in the Bible people have stuff taken away from them before they have
What
the
G. Bush, I mean, I'm going right there. You and I are on the same wavelength there because, first of all, when it comes to you, in First Peter, it says that God will exalt you, humble yourself under the mighty hand of God, and He will exalt you in due season. And that purpose of that exaltation is really not for you. That purpose for that exaltation is to put you in a higher plane or higher view to bring Him more glory. And as far as the pride thing that you were talking about, when somebody gets puffed up, the scripture also tells us in Proverbs that pride pride cometh before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. So I mean, you're right there on that. And unfortunately, too many of us, especially our young black males like John Moran and others, because of what you just said, have to experience those things. And I'm just hoping, in his case, that it doesn't get him dead, because the kind of stuff that he's doing, it can get you. Folks ain't. I mean, I'm not telling you something you don't know already. But folks, they're not playing out here, and that can get you dead.
hey, very focused.
Exactly.
Like sometimes, I always say, I don't own the land. By the way, if you're out there and you're responsible for owning that's your right.
Right.
You should be able to have that land and be responsible with it, and you're using it for a particular purpose. But when you have a weapon like that, I call it a weapon of mass destruction because that can take two people's lives and countless lives in 1 second. I just believe, I always tell myself I don't want to fight because the devil might hit people around me, but I got an angel next to me. You know that.
Right. Right. I hear you. I tell people all the time, and I respect you if that's what you want to do. If you're a responsible gun owner, I said, but for personally myself, if the Holy Spirit can't protect me, then and the angels can't protect me, then no one can. And you all see, listeners, we see how G. Bush and I got deep. We ain't even touched sports yet, so we had to get into the real nuts and bolts of life right here, not just how it goes sometimes. But there's a lot of optimism in this town, and there's some trepidation as well in this town, G. Bush, regarding the Cleveland Browns. Why do you think this is so? Why, especially those who have trepidation, because if you look at it on paper, and and I guess is why they have fans have the trepidation they do, because we've heard this rap before about what's on paper. But if you look at it on paper, the Browns are one of the most talented teams in the league. They shored up their defensive line by bringing Zadarius Smith in, by bringing his partner from Tomlinson in from Minnesota. They did that. They shored it up by bringing Double O in here. They really took an upgrade by bringing Schwartz in here to be the DC. And you look at the talent on the other side of the ball with Amari Cooper. I really like our draft pick out of Tennessee. I like that. I think this is going to be the year that Njoku has a breakout season. Only question mark I have regarding the offense is I'm not real high on Jed Wills. I think Jed Wills has retrogressed. That his best year was his rookie year, but if that's the case, you know, you can slide protection that way too, and given the mobility of Deshaun Watson, and to me, the huge difference between now and past years, where Browns fans have had this optimism only to be let down, is the fact that now you have, at least potentially, and has played out before in his career, you have a bona fide, legitimate franchise quarterback here. So, what do you think? Are these feelings of optimism, are they warranted? And what about those who are a little hesitant to get on board, so to speak?
Well, I think you go back and you felt like you were a little bit apprehensive because the Cleveland Browns. I remember doing the Cleveland Browns have had 5 years, 1989, only 5 years in which they had over a 5 year.
Mm-hmm.
Also, if you go back and look in terms of the fan base perspective, you know, the Cleveland Browns are national champions,
Right.
international.
Right.
I've met so many people with the Brown backers in Hawaii, with the Brown backers in Ireland, with the Brown backers doing all of on my podcast, you'll notice when I do my live, there's people from all over the country. I do a thing called roll call route. You know, ask people simply where they call in or where they listen from. And it's all over from Iceland, South America, Australia, Africa, all over Canada, multiple Canada, all over the states. There's so many people call in because, you know, football started great with the Brown. It was started in
That's right.
and when you look at some of you know, you talk about Jim Ford, talk about Russell Cole,
The
you know,
goal.
the greatest super of all time, Jim Brown.
Jim
They
Nick.
know
Yes.
all about the innovator, the author, you know, your modern author. You coach the national high, coach the Browns in Cincinnati, one of the architects, the architects of football. Even to Mary Martin, when you take a look at what he was able to do, statues now put up in front of campus. He kept high school coaches before football started. So when you got that many traditions, you had all these officers around the American team. You know, they say Dallas is the American team, but if you notice, anytime the Cleveland Browns do good, anytime the Cleveland Browns have a good celebration, national media always picks it up. Always. We lead on Colin Cowherd, we lead on First Things Tuesday, First Things First, with Jenkins. All these different big publications pick
That's
us
true.
up
That's true.
because of what the Cleveland Browns are. Now, why are people hesitant? Because of that is because we have not looked up to them. And we've lost a lot of teammates as Browns fans because of the fact that we've underdelivered. And it necessarily has nothing to do with the fans. It just has to do with ownership. And you get some would say cheap ass superstars, you're in trouble, right? When you get those moments and you look at Pittsburgh Steelers survivors, they have had good coaches in the
Since
last
1969.
that's crazy. And I don't even want to go about how good this team had. And then to add insult to injury, the Browns just didn't have survive. They turned into the Baltimore Ravens. They take one of your stories today, one of the best that you were out there. They turned him into the general manager. And then less than 3 years after that, 4 years in 2000, they become the general manager. Think about this. You know how long the Cleveland Browns family has waited to get to that point. And a new organization that was just coming about a year in less than 3 years is now working with Bill
Also
Belichick.
Lombardi.
And that hit you so hard.
Yes, it did.
And what it does is it gives you, you know, you got expression. It's like being gay. It starts
Right.
They were going to for it.
God had to come down and confuse the language.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
So that just goes to show that when you apply yourself, you're not making versus one person. They
Well, Garrett, here and to your point, I mean, here's a prime example of what you were just saying. That this fan base is so stressed out to the point that they don't believe that they deserve to have good players. How often do you hear on your show about people saying, "Well, no, we don't need DeAndre Hopkins," or yeah, Dalvin Cook, yeah, no, we don't really want him. I mean, it's almost like not saying that we don't want him, but no, we're poor old Browns fan. We don't deserve that. We are proud when we can get a Duke Johnson and draft him and try to develop him, or we love Nick Chubb and rightfully so. But we want our own guys that we can develop, and there's nothing wrong with that. You do want to draft well and develop your own, but but on the same token, if you can add a premier wide receiver to a team that has a franchise quarterback with a premier running back, why wouldn't you want to do
then you get the ball. Well, I got that. What the hell was going on? And
that? All right.
it was just so uneasy, right? And you connected two and two. It's how we think. So a lot of times, so many people, because of the era of playing for and he was doing nothing, nobody said, and nobody looks like people when you come from that successful.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know nobody that's doing that type of thing. What happens is you become to have like an echo chamber, right? You start to believe that all the bad stuff you deserve. You start to believe, and you start to have to make something apologies for the people that have fallen in that level. So when you throw it up the person, man, it seems that if you look at it, right, they can't get mediocre to mediocrity. Like if you look at it, you're old enough to remember how it was before the sport.
Yeah.
They love it.
Yeah.
They love flying good. They listen. They love guys who talented out there just putting themselves together with one team and getting knocked into the goalpost.
Yeah, he's Cleveland. He represents Cleveland. That's what Cleveland is all about, right? You hear that narrative? Yeah.
I'm like, wow, you're right. No, Cleveland does not. Listen, that ain't what the Dallas about that. And when Dallas, and when you look at the thing about Deshaun Watson, I started thinking, I started to analyze. I'm like, how would this sound different? When you think Deshaun Watson thing would sound different from when they love Brady win, or when they champion weekly, or like that's middle of the road guys. I mean, I said I didn't understand what it was. Sometimes I do my college just to not to be entertained, but I do my college and I say, hey, let's prove this point. It's not about the big game. That's the big game. What it is so long you get before the talent, you don't understand that you don't think anybody can improve. You start
Exactly.
to believe that nobody can
Nobody.
survive.
Yeah.
And that all the players are automatically playing, even if the games are on basketball court. That's why the Odell Beckham Jr. backlash stuff is Jarvis Landry backlash happened. Is because even when we had him, and they were talking about the superstar. By the way, Jarvis Landry was catching 100 balls a year in college.
Yes, he was.
When this was falling, even though so many people were so distraught by that, what it was saying was, you're not doing, you're treating these players like they're regular guys. No, we got to treat these superstars, we got to get guys that are more efficient. And what we found out, obviously, college was a free agent. We didn't have a quarterback in the league.
Well, Gary, see, it hasn't always been that way in this town. It's usually I'm in denial. I will admit about my age. I'm like that woman on that commercial that says age is nothing but a number and mine is unlisted. But It wasn't always like that. I'm gonna put it to you like this. I was 8 years old when the Browns won the championship. I remember speaking of Steubenville, having to ride down to Steubenville that day to my maternal grandparents' house with my paternal grandparents to watch that game because the NFL had a blackout at that time that didn't get lifted until 1972. So I know what it's like to have great players. I met Jim Brown in person when I was 9 years old and stammered and stuttered in his presence. I saw Paul Warfield play, Leroy Kelly, and all of those teams. When the Browns, when you talked about the Cleveland Browns, you talked about the Browns as one of the flagship franchises of the NFL, but their name was mentioned with excellence. So the malaise didn't start until the 70s, and then it really got kicked in this in this edition of the Browns that came into being in 1999, where now that old excellence, that standard of excellence that was established by those teams in the 60s and the early part of the 70s, and then the year of the Cardiac Kids, and then the Kozar era. That was the last time that this town really had the standard of excellence that it had. And then when the team was taken away to Baltimore, now we're just so happy to have a team back that I guess we accept anything, and that's why we have the malaise that we have now.
You know, you mentioned something, and this is a really quick thing. Obviously, one of my mentors is BSK.
Yeah,
I
that's the
him all the time. He always said, these are not my Brown. Cleveland Brown is like I this iteration of Cleveland Brown. And he was always kind of pushing a lot of people said the same thing. They should have left that where it was at, and they should have came back with something else. Because that because the history of the tradition of the Cleveland Browns is not involved. The Cleveland Browns, the Jim Brown, and the guys that he watched and idolized growing up, it was different generations of Cleveland Browns, and that it was tough for him to talk about, the Browns coming back because he didn't see the same level of, I guess, the position that history would call it all the things that the Browns were doing when he was watching the
Yeah, no, that left in '95, and Paul Warfield. Just to give you an example, in 1965, Paul Warfield opened a Goodyear. I think I told you this story, or it might have been Earl, but Paul Warfield opened a Goodyear store in my neighborhood. I grew up in the Lee Harbor neighborhood of Cleveland, and the day that the store opened, myself and a couple of my friends went up to the store on Glendale and Lee. There's a beauty supply store there now. And at the grand opening, of course, Paul Warfield was there. That was the end of his rookie year going into the second year. John Wooten was there. But then there was a giant of a man, bigger than life of a man there by the name of James Nathaniel Brown, a.k.a. Jim Brown, a.k.a. the GOAT. And just to meet him in person left an indelible impression upon me as an almost 9-year-old at that time. And Jim Brown represented what the Cleveland Browns were all about on the field. It was just a standard of excellence that not only through him, but just the guys that he played with that this franchise is missing, and unfortunately, as you pointed out, went away and was brought back in Baltimore with a former Hall of Famer of the Cleveland Browns that built a dynasty there. So I'm sure you're familiar with this, Garrett, because it's something that you do on your show. We have to go rapid fire now, so we got about 10 minutes left. I thank you again. Wish I could talk to you for 2 hours on here, but rapid fire. So the Guardians, the Guardians have got off to a slow start this year. Their offense, quite frankly, for the first couple of months has been offensive. And now here in the last couple of weeks or so, it seems like they caught fire. It seems like players are starting to produce. numbers like there's on the back of their baseball cards, and it helps that they're in the AL sinful, not central, sinful division, because this division is a sin that every team is under 500 except Minnesota is playing 500. So where do you see with them now? Do you think that they can make a run and get into the playoffs again this year?
Well, yeah. Yeah. For me, I always consider like this. They're AFC position. They're always in the game. They have two wild cards now. They're always in the conversation of being in the playoffs. But I think this year, even on with the slow start and the team being on the AFC, even on the map being very solid for the first half of the year, I think just because they're in that division, and if you see their game and a half, maybe a game back against Minnesota, teams are not head to toe team better than the Guardians. I think the Guardians probably will make the playoffs this year, but also I want to say it comes down to this as well. Just because you make the playoffs doesn't mean you're a contender, right?
No.
Um, we run that, and just go back to last year with the Twins. There was a lot of games that the Guardians were on the break. They had two games to close out. All they needed was win the one game to close the game out. And what happened, you saw it in the way that was. It takes a lot to string together a lot of hits to go back to back to back. Really one of those like eliminations and things like that with Staples and no power. A lot of those games, the Yankees were outplayed, but they had the chance to get out with the three home run. And so
Exactly.
you look at that, I think they could make the playoffs, and I don't think they'll go far as the playoffs if they do. Without losing for another time.
Well, here's the dilemma. Well, before I say that, to your point is exactly 100% correct. You're spot on there because statistics have shown that in the playoffs, we're talking about the regular season, but in the playoffs, the teams that hit the most home runs in a series more often than not win that series. And that's exactly what happened in that Yankee series. Game five, you remember Giancarlo Stanton basically ended the game in the first inning when he hit the three-run homer off of Savali. So they're going to have to make a decision about Shane Bieber. Now I know that as long as they're in contention this year, there's hesitation to trade him. But my thought is this, and I'd like to get yours before we go to the Cavs. My thought on that is this: that you will get more for Shane. They're not going to sign him. I don't know if I want to sign him to a long-term contract, because given the analytics and the sabermetrics of it all, he is on the decline rather than on the incline. So I believe that you would get more if you traded him either before or after trade deadline this year than what you would get if you wait to the end of the season and try to trade him during the winter meetings. Because at that time, the teams that you're going to trade with, if they really want him, they're not going to give you anything for him because they say, well, we can sign him. We don't have to give up anything. My proposal is this. I think that the Guardians could trade Bieber, as much as that would hurt, could trade Bieber and still be in contention and win this division based on what I've seen from Logan Allen, from Tanner Bybee. You get McKenzie back. Savali's looked good so thus far since he's been back. And Gavin Williams has looked lights out. Now, granted, it's AAA, but he's looked lights out down there. And the way this team can develop pitching, St. Louis is in the NL sinful division because that division is a joke as well. They have a surplus of hitting. We have a surplus of pitching. There's a guy on the St. Louis Cardinals by the name of Nolan Gorman, who, by the way, hit a home run last night. I think he has either 15 or 16 home runs right now. You're not going to get Jordan Walker. But if you bring him here and you give them Bieber, you got a corner outfielder with power that would greatly upgrade your lineup and give you that bat that you need to possibly win the series, because the margin of error in these playoff series are so thin that a guy like that could actually win you a series. What are your thoughts on Bieber in his future?
Yeah, I love the way you're thinking about that, and I think also with Bieber, I think you take a look at his
explain
And when
it.
Malachi
Mm-hmm.
cracked out the woman, now we're talking about a guy who, what needs a man going to worship for a guy like that. Our pictures are a little bit different. When you go in 99, you have a little more than red, right?
Right.
You don't really go past him. If he doesn't fit in the upper 90 or mid upper 90, then that means the rest of his stuff has to be like that. Dynamic curves, dynamic change, are you so quickly with that? Well, you have to cut it. Right? So you kind of have multiple.
Children were, quote, going to kill her, unquote. Now, mind you, we're not talking about teenage children. We're not talking about 19, 18, 19-year-old kids. We're talking about minor children. But this woman called the police department there and said that these children were going to kill her. Well, once the children went home and told their mother what had happened, of course, what the next series of events unfolded. Miss Owens went over to Miss Lorenz's apartment, knocking on her door, demanding to talk to her about what she did with her children. Now, Miss Lorenz said that Miss Owens made comments to the effect that I'm going to kill you. That hasn't been corroborated by anyone. But that's what she said, that Miss Owens said, that I'm going to kill you, come out here, I'm going to kill you, etc., etc. And who knows, maybe that was said. I don't know it. As I said, it hasn't been corroborated. But Miss Owens did not have a weapon. I want you to hear that. I want you to hone in on that. Miss Owens did not have a weapon. She was unarmed. All right? When she went to her neighbor's door to confront her neighbor as to why her neighbor is throwing roller skates at her children, waving an umbrella at them, and yelling racial slurs at them. Miss Lorenz never opened the door to let Miss Owens in or for herself to come out. What Miss Lorenz did do, however, is grab her 38 caliber Ruger. I think I may be mispronouncing it. It's spelled Rutger is the type of weapon. Maybe it's Rutger. I'm not certain. But nonetheless, she grabbed her weapon and she fired a shot through the door, striking Miss Owens in the upper chest area, ultimately costing her her life. Now, this event happened, and again, Miss Owens was not armed. All right, she was not armed. She didn't have a pistol or a firearm or a knife or anything of that nature. It was herself coming over, and again, these two women had a history. Because again, this was not the first time that Miss Lorenz had yelled things at these children. She fired her weapon through the door. In front of, oh, by the way, in front of her 10-year-old son, who had to stand there and watch his mother be shot. Then had to run to neighbors to have them, to tell them, my mother's been shot, call 911, which the neighbors did. They got there, they rushed her to the hospital, but as I said, she died either at the hospital or on her way there. Now, Miss Lorenz was not initially arrested that evening. And you know why she wasn't arrested? She was not arrested because, and this was the sheriff himself said, because she claimed it was a stand your ground self-defense. And so therefore, according to what the sheriff said, they had to investigate the incident before they were going to bring charges. Again, Miss Owens was not in this woman's house. Miss Owens could not get into this woman's house. All this woman had to do was to even close her door and walk away from it. And if she really felt that threatened, she could have called the police and said, "There's a woman banging on my door here. Would you come here to this situation?" But she was not arrested initially. It wasn't until a day or so later, I think it was either last Saturday or it might have been last Sunday. I don't remember which day it was. But she was not arrested initially because she claimed self-defense under the Stand Your Ground statute that the state of Florida has. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a dangerous situation. This is a dangerous law that is on the books in multiple states across this country that allows people to use deadly force and basically get away with it because of the existence of this law. Now, subsequently, Susan Lorenz has been arrested. She's been charged, I believe, with second-degree manslaughter. And we're waiting trial. Not sure if she's out on bail or not at this time. But the reason that she felt as though she can do this, well, there's there's a lot of reasons why she felt she can do it. Number one, because of this ridiculous law. Number two, given the fact that she's yelling racial slurs, is the reason that she felt that she could do this, because after all, I'm better than these people. These people don't belong in my same stratosphere. And I can take whatever action I want to because of who I am and who they are. And this is the danger in this type of legislation. As I said, we saw it with George Zimmerman and Trayvon Martin. We saw it here in this situation, and there's been other situations across the country. It just speaks again to the gun culture that we have in this country. There's no other country, no other, quote, civilized, in Western industrialized nation, unquote, that has this type of legislation on the books in anywhere in that country, be it provinces in Canada, be it in Australia or Western Europe or any of these places, Japan, they do not have this stand your ground. And stand your ground gives people who are not trained, people who have preconceived notions, empowers them to make a decision that is lethal and take someone's life. Ladies and gentlemen, listen to this broadcast and watching this on the various outlets that you watch us on. These laws are ridiculous and they have to go. It just is a offshoot and speaks to the gun mentality that exists in this country, where a person who was not even a threat, they were not in your house, they were outside of your door. You shot this woman through your door. You could have closed your door. You could have called the police, closed your door and called the police. What was she going to do? She couldn't knock the door in. She was unarmed. So how are you claiming that your life was under a threat? Trayvon Martin was unarmed. Yet George Zimmerman got away with it. I'm not going to be surprised, nor will I be shocked if Susan Lorenz gets away with it. I'm hoping that's not the case. But would any of you that are listening to me right now on the various outlets that you can listen to us or watching us on YouTube or Facebook Live right now, would any of you be shocked or surprised if Susan Lawrence was eventually exonerated and found not guilty of whatever they're going to charge her with. Meanwhile, 4 minor children have lost their mother, who, by all accounts of the things that I've read about her on the various media outlets, her whole life was centered around her children. 3 boys and 1 girl. Mother gone. And for what? Because somebody was knocking on your door in a way that you didn't like, in a way that you felt that you were threatened, so you just figured you can go get your gun and shoot her through the door? You know, just like happened in Kansas City a couple months ago with a young 16-year-old boy had gone to a house to look for his siblings and had gone to the wrong door, and all he did was knock on the door, and the residents there, again, an elderly white male, shot down this 16-year-old black boy. Now, fortunately, he didn't die. But this is the danger of the stand your ground law. This is the danger of the gun mentality that we have in this country. This is the danger of the gun mentality of this country, where people can own firearms, where you don't have to be licensed, where you don't have to have training, where you don't have to have anything, where some states where you don't even have to have background checks, no red flag laws, none of that. You need a driver's license to drive a car and insurance to drive a car. If I get pulled over in any municipality in the Northeast Ohio area where I live, and I don't have a license or I don't have insurance, I am going to be criminally charged with something. But here in the state of Ohio, since we have CCW, conceal, carry, and carry and conceal, since we don't have background checks, since you can get a firearm without a license or training, I can get a gun without license. I can get a firearm without any insurance. I can get that with all that, but I can't drive a car with that. Someone please explain the logic to that to me. You know, I'm sorry, I just have a public school education, so I'm not smart enough to figure that out. Somebody figure that out. Somebody explain that to me at 216-939-5087. How, on the one hand, I need a driver's license and insurance to drive a car, but on the other hand, I don't need any of that to purchase a firearm. You tell me which one of those two things are more deadly. When somebody comes to my door, somebody comes to the door banging on my door, I'm not going to run my car through the door and run them over. So once again, stand your ground has resulted in a tragedy, in just a horrific tragedy that should have never happened in the first place. But again, because of racial fears, inherent historical racial fears, this 35-year-old woman didn't even reach the age of 40 and has 4 children are dead right now. Can you imagine the traumatic effect that young boy that's 10 years old, that had to watch his mother get gunned down, and oh, by the way, he's blaming himself for it. He blamed himself for his mother's death. All because of the gun mentality that we have in this country, the lax gun laws that we have in this country, the insane gun laws that we have in this country, and this ridiculous stand your ground. What is this, the Wild Wild West? Just a point of information, in Dodge City, back during the so-called Wild Wild West, you had to check your guns when you came into town. But a lot of you didn't know that. Look it up. It's true. But not in Ocala, Florida. Because if you're knocking on my door in a way I don't like it, I can just shoot you through the door. And you know what? The silence is deafening from the NRA, deafening from presidential candidate Ron Benito Mussolini DeSantis, deafening from Fox News, and Newsmax, and all these other outlets. Nobody's saying anything. But I am. I'm sick of it. I'm sick of this. I'm sick of these unnecessary gun deaths because of these ridiculous laws that we have in this country, where you have 355 million people to live in this country, and you have 480 million guns in this country. You're listening to the right side on No Static Radio. We don't need a static radio show. Donald Trump. Donald Trump was indicted on Thursday by Special Prosecutor Jack Smith from the Department of Justice. Donald Trump, along with his former aide, Walt Nauta. And this whole indictment centers around the documents at his Mar-a-Lago home in Florida. Now, here's the situation, because you hear a lot of noise on the media that he's being unfairly targeted, that what about the documents that Joe Biden had, what about the documents that Mike Pence had, how come they're not being investigated, how come they're not being indicted? Simple reason. All Donald Trump had to do, ladies and gentlemen, was this. When the National Archives asked him to turn in his documents that he took out of the White House when he left the White House in January of 2021, all he had to do was turn them over, and this wouldn't even be a news story right now. He would not even be indicted. But listen, they didn't ask him just once, no. They asked him not twice, no, but they asked him 3 times. No, I'm not once, twice, 3 times a lady. No, I'm not going Lionel Richie on you here now. They asked him 3 times to turn in the documents. And the second and third time he turned them in, and when they asked him the third time, he lied and said he had turned all of them in, so a subpoena had to be issued. He ignored the subpoena, and that's why the FBI last August went to his Mar-a-Lago home, because they saw on the cameras, the security cameras, people moving boxes from his home to a basement area. So they obtained a search warrant issued by a federal magistrate judge that allowed them to come in to his home and to get the documents. And the reason why he is being indicted is for this and nothing else. This is not some political hit job or witch hunt or all the other things that you hear Trump and his supporters saying. This is a case of, once again, his narcissism, once again, his megalomania, once again, him thinking that he is above everything and everybody else is what got him in trouble again, because all he had to do was turn in the documents and this wouldn't even be a story, wouldn't be an item, wouldn't even be an issue right now. But just like the Stormy Daniels situation, but just like the potential Georgia voting fraud that Fonnie Lewis, the DA in Fulton County, is looking into, but just like the January 6th investigation that Special Prosecutor Jack Smith also is looking into, he brought all of this upon himself because of his narcissistic ego. His almost psychotic narcissistic ego, almost. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not trying to play one on the air. But just look at him. Look, okay, you break it down. Here's a person who never admits they do anything wrong. Here's a person who said that they've never done anything in their life that they regret. Here's a person who blames everybody else and never himself for anything that goes wrong, but then on the other hand takes credit for everything, including things that he has no business taking credit for. But let's just get into the nuts and bolts. And by the way, you can see this for yourself. You can go and get a copy of it and look at this 49-page indictment that was released the other day. I'm just going to go over some of the highlights of it. So, first of all, one, he was indicted for what they would call willful retention of national defense information. 31 of these stored national defense information documents, 31 of them were stored at Mar-a-Lago. And they were stored in a place where individuals who had no security clearance could see them. And it was also reported that Donald Trump showed these to individuals who did not have security clearance to see them. That's number one. Number two, he was indicted for what they call conspiracy to obstruct justice. Trump and his aide, again, his aide's name is Walt Nauta. Trump and his aide, Walt Nauta, are charged with conspiracy to keep these documents from the grand jury. That's what they were charged with. They were charged with conspiracy to keep these documents from the grand jury, because basically what they did is that they lied. That's right, lied, and said that he did not have them, that he had turned everything in, which was a lie. Number three, he was indicted for withholding documents. This is just ridiculous. He was indicted for withholding documents or a record. Trump and Nauta again were accused of misleading one of their attorneys. Think about this. He was accused of misleading his attorney by moving boxes of classified documents so that the attorney could not find them or introduce them to the grand jury. That's what he's charged with. So when you hear all this bluster from the Josh Hawleys and the Kevin McCarthy's and the Marjorie Taylor Greens and Jim Jordan of this world, this is what he's being charged. So you figure it out for yourself and ask yourself, are these legitimate charges? And if someone other than Donald Trump or someone that was once president was doing it, wouldn't even be a question. Number four, he was also indicted for corrupt concealing of a record or document. He was also charged for concealing a document in a federal investigation, hiding those documents so that the documents could not be reviewed by a grand jury or those who are investigating. So that's what he's been charged. charged with hiding and concealing and conspiring to keep these documents out of the hands of those who they belonged in, not his. Oh, by the way, I didn't even mention the CNN tape where he was heard on tape admitting that he could have declassified these when he was president, but he didn't, and now he shouldn't be handling them now. Those were his own words. Once again, he was on tape. We talked about that last week. All right? He also was charged for scheming to conceal. Trump and Nada hid Trump's possessions of the documents from the grand jury. Also, he was charged in this indictment for, and I'm sure this is going to shock you when I say this, false statements, in other words, lies, and representations. He was charged for false statements and representations. Trump and Nada allegedly, I have to say allegedly until it's proven in a court of law, allegedly caused one of his attorneys to make false statements to the FBI and a grand jury regarding the results of the search. This, by the way, was the Trump attorney that was called before the Department of Justice and had to waive the attorney-client privilege because what Trump told him and then what he reported to the authorities was something altogether different. So to keep himself out of trouble and come clean, he had to waive the attorney-client privilege and tell the truth about what the president or ex-president shared with him. Again, I'm just reading these to you so you can make your decision as to whether or not these are legitimate charges. He was also charged with false statements and representation. This final charge or count accused Nada of giving fake answers during a voluntary interview with the FBI in late May. These are what he's being charged with. So basically, what this all boils down to is he's being charged for conspiracy, for falsifying statements, and hiding documents, top secret documents, from the authorities. Basically, trying to get his attorney to suborn perjury by giving his attorney false information to come before the FBI and the archive and the National Archives, giving false information so that attorney can make false statements. So these are what he's being charged for. And this is just a small sample of them. Again, there are 37 charges. I just read to you 9 of them. If you want to see all of them, as I said, you can go online, you can read the report. It has been released. But I want you to hear this because there's a sentiment out there, well, all presidents keep documents and, why are they picking on Trump? Folks, he lied. He lied and it conspired with his aide to hide, to falsify, to deceive. The question is, why was he wanting to keep these documents in the first place? One of them had to deal with a plan to go to war with Iran and the strategies of all that. This is top secret classified information. You realize that it compromises the lives of those who are working in intelligence for this government. Not only does it compromise their lives, but it compromises the relationship that we as the United States have with our allies as well. But all of that doesn't matter to Donald Trump because, after all, it's not about their lives. It's not about U.S. intelligence. It's not about compromising the relationship that we have with our Western allies. It's all about me and the grift. That's what it's all about. Again, this is why we call this program The Right Side, because we come on here to tell you the truth. And there's nothing that I said to you. I'm not giving my opinion on this. I'm just stating the facts. The facts show that the federal government, that the Department of Justice has a very legitimate case against Donald Trump. Now, does that mean he can't run for president? No, that doesn't mean that. He can run under indictment. He can run even if he's convicted. Do I think that Donald Trump is ever going to serve one day in prison? No, I don't. I think if he's found guilty of these, he'll be under house arrest. The reason why I don't think he'll ever serve one day of a prison sentence is, in case you all don't know, all presidents that are living, even when they are ex-presidents, still have a Secret Service detail assigned to them. So that would be unreasonable to ask a Secret Service detail to go into a federal prison with Donald Trump. I know I wouldn't want to be part of that detail. So everyone is innocent until proven guilty. And I'm not saying Trump is innocent or guilty. I'm just presenting the facts. The facts will come out in trial. Be presented to a jury. They will make the decision. You're listening to The Right Side on No Static Radio. We don't bring the static, but we sure don't bring the noise. We are coming to the end of our broadcast, and as we do each week, we conclude our broadcast with the hero and zero of the week. The hero of this week, actually it's two individuals, is John David Norton and Tommy Taylor. John David Norton and Tommy Taylor are heroes of the week because they are biking across country. They started in San Diego and they're going to finish in Boston. They're biking from San Diego to Boston across this country, raising money for kidney care. They're raising money at Easttown. They were recently here in Cleveland. I saw their story on the local news broadcast. And they're riding across country, raising money to fight kidney disease and for kidney care. So they are our heroes of the week, and it's our hopes and our wishes that they meet their goals and they exceed their goals. Our zero of the week is someone we talked about earlier in the program here, just in our segment before our last segment, and that is Susan Lorenz. She is our zero of the week for murder, for killing an unarmed 35-year-old mother of four, leaving these children motherless over nothing. You've been listening to The Right Side on No Static Radio. We don't bring the static, but we're sure to bring the noise. Right now, I see that my time is up. Thank you very much for your time. And until next week next Saturday at 3 p.m. Shalom.